Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to May's Next Partner webinar with Ed Sales Elevation Experience. This is a real special one with the ins and outs of EdTech sales. We have two EdTech giants here joining us today. So thank you for joining and or listening in. My name is Lisa Friedlander. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer over here at Next, powered by Schulman Rogers. Next is an innovative and award-winning platform for the delivery of legal services to startup and emerging growth tech companies. Please check out our website, next.law, if you haven't already. There's an abundance of great resources on there, including recordings of past partner webinars, as well as Startup U, our education platform. So without further ado, please welcome the Breaking the Grade co-hosts, EdTech entrepreneur, founder Josh Chernikoff, and co-host John Gamba, who is currently the entrepreneur in residence over at University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education Catalyst program. We are going to learn today how to develop meaningful relationships with prospective B2B buyers in the educational space. John Gamba, as a serial entrepreneur, the Director of Innovative Programs and EIR at University of Penn Graduate School of Education. His first big break came when he co-founded the first school-to-home communication software that allowed administrators to record and send personalized voice messages to parents in a moment's notice. His company was eventually sold to NTI and then to Blackboard in a rather huge all-cash exit, which we can let John tell you about. John is also serves as a founding director of the Gamba Family Foundation, which is committed to closing the achievement gap in our country's inner city schools. And Josh Chernikoff is a two-time founder and CEO, now a business coach specializing in lead generation in the education space. He has started, built to scale, and sold two companies in the education space over the last decade. Awesome. He's been a featured speaker at StartEd, UPenn's GSE, a business competition judge.
In the basement of this place, so
no, it's all good. Let's just
guys, if you can please mute yourselves, if you don't mind, that would be terrific. And Josh has served as spotlighted on ABC, NBC, Fox, and CBS. We are again in for a real host with these two EdTech experts. I'm going to turn it over to them, and please feel free to add your questions into the chat. And we, of course, will leave some time towards the end as well. So welcome, Josh and John.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lisa. How are you today?
They're great. Thrilled to have you guys here. Really grateful.
Great to be here, Lisa. Thank you for having us.
Good. Thank you. I was when you said EdTech giants, first I blushed. I looked at John, who's just kind of, moving some papers around. So, he hears that a lot. I appreciate you saying that, but I was looking at John. John is the EdTech giant, and I'm glad that he was able to join us. We're going to walk through relationship building in the education space, which is a good title, but what really sells, what people really want to hear about, is the lead generation. So we're really going to get at the heart of that. John, is there anything you wanted to add? Lisa gave us great introductions, but anything you want to add?
I looked at my papers because I hate when people say EdTech giant.
Okay,
I like to say when people read my bio and talk about major exits, and I'm reminded of that Michelangelo quote, Lisa. Michelangelo once said, "If you only knew how hard I worked at my craft, you wouldn't be as impressed with what I've created." I have a little bit of a different twist. If you only knew how many times I failed at entrepreneurship, you wouldn't be impressed with the occasional success that I've had. So I'm humbled to be here. I'm excited to share my story and some stories about B2B sales in the EdTech space and some of the experiences we're having here with some awesome entrepreneurs here at Penn's Graduate School of Education, some of whom are on here today. So I'm excited to dive in.
I mean, you learn something new about John every single day. We could probably just close the webinar at that point with that quote. So that was great. But we're here and we're going to do this. We're going to talk relationships. We're going to talk lead generation. This is definitely for education CEOs and entrepreneurs. We know some of the folks who are here. Some are educators, some are entrepreneurs. So that's great. We're going to talk about high converting leads, not just leads, but high converting leads. Because if you want leads, I'll get you hundreds of thousands of leads by tonight. But if you want high converting leads, it's a process. And that's what we're going to talk about. And we also know that selling to educators is tough. And we even have, I know one educator here, And I've talked to her a bunch about the fact that, she says that she gets emails from people who, want to be a part of her school, but I just kind of ignore them. And I'm like, no, those are our emails. Those are the emails I was sending. So we know firsthand by somebody who's on this show here that it's tough. And if you're in the right place, if you want to build that study pipeline, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to try and generate leads in record time and teach you how to do this today. High value leads, convert leads into customers, assess where your starting line is, very important. Level the playing field between you and your competition, identify strategies to find more prospects. We've got tons and tons of those, and actually ones that fit your personality. I think that's important. I found when working with people that not every type of lead generation engine is for them, and we'll talk about that. And we're going to show you how to apply what you've learned here to start generating these leads. So essentially, this lead generation system that I've come up with, that I think John would say he endorses, has basically 3 pillars to it. So I'm going to bring up my screen here. I'm a former TV guy, and generally I work, this sounds bad, but I generally work with a producer. So producing this on my own is not as easy. So bear with me. There's us. There's John and I. This is the Ed Sales Elevation Experience. That's what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to open this back up again for us so that we can see. And here's the 3 pillars, okay? So first, evaluate. We're going to talk about targeting your ideal client, not just any lead, okay? But leads that convert. That's very important, okay? Excavate. We're going to build. We're going to demonstrate thought leadership in the education space so that you stand out from the competition. And finally, elevate you, okay? Present an irresistible offer that school districts or principals or parents, whoever, your decision maker, can't walk away from. So this is where I bring John in. John and I kind of do our show here, and if I'm calling the game, he's generally doing the color commentary. And so we're going to get John's expertise on each one of these pillars as we start with evaluate. And I know that this is near and dear to his heart in identifying the ideal client. So John, talk about why that's important and how you see this play out day in and day out at Penn GSE.
So first of all, I do endorse this because I've seen how it works with some of your clients, Josh. So it's not just talking points, and it's just not a model that you've put out there through sort of an ethereal lens. It's very practical. So I am excited to talk about it. And on this first pillar, when I think about evaluate, I think about some of the resources that we encourage entrepreneurs to review during this evaluation process. And this first bullet, identify the ideal client. I am a huge fan of Steve Blank. And if any of you have worked with me, some of you have worked with me in the NSF, NIH, IES areas through the SBIR programs. We believe very much in the customer discovery process and doing that through the lens of customer discovery. Customer development always starts with this process of customer discovery and identifying the ideal client. And it's not just, throwing a dart and hoping that you've identified, just any client. It takes work. Customer discovery takes a lot of work. One of my favorite books, if you want a practical guide from Steve Blank, is 4 Steps to the Epiphany. The book opens with this quote, one of my favorite quotes. A legendary hero is usually the founder of something. The founder of a new age, the founder of a new religion, the founder of a new city, the founder of a new way of life. In order to found something new, one has to leave the old and go on a quest of discovery of the seed idea, a germinal idea that will have the potential bringing forth that new thing. And that's from Joseph Campbell, Hero with 1,000 Faces. And Steve Blank has this process of what good customer discovery looks like. In the I-Core program, there's an insistence that you have 100 prospective customer interviews, not 20, not 30, not 80, 100 before you really can identify who that ideal client is. And we're really big believers in that. And through that customer discovery process, you really do ask a lot of questions. Questions like, are we trying to think of this new product or service through the lens of vitamins or aspirins? Or is this a real hair on fire issue that you're trying to address? You know, one potential prospect or one potential venture that's on this call right now, Gab on. They recognized early on that a more engaged or a more informed parent led to a higher achieving student, but where they really dug in this customer discovery process is thinking about it through the lens of student-directed parental engagement, and really got underneath what does it look like when students are actually directing the interactions with parents through that lens. And they've done a lot of customer discovery on habitual student-directed customer student interactions with parents and what that actually means. So big believer in initiating this evaluation process through the lens of good customer discovery. Think Steve Blank is a great resource for anyone. You can go to the Cliff Notes and see some of the videos online, or go to some of his books, one of which is The 4 Steps to the Epiphany, which was one of my favorites, which starts you off with practical guides and practical applications on the customer discovery process.
Good. And actually, later in this, we're also going to talk about not only the idea of customer discovery, but literally how you can execute on that. You know, is it email? Is it LinkedIn? Is it both? Probably it's both. So we'll talk about that. And speaking of LinkedIn, you know, another thing that you got to do, and frankly, I've been encouraging my friend, my mentor, my coach, my co-host, John Gamba, that we should work on his LinkedIn, but we'll get to that another day. Create the $1 million message. The $1 million message is going to help with the, you know, transforming your company via LinkedIn profiles. You know, a lot of people have CVs as their LinkedIn profile, and we want this to be a high converting sales page. You know, I think the old way of doing LinkedIn is having that CV up there, but changing it to a high converting sales page can work. That $1 million message, hopefully mine is something like that. I worked very hard on my LinkedIn. I'm reading it right here. It says, I help companies in education get 800 new qualified B2B leads in 8 weeks through my Ed Sales Elevation experience. Milk and Judge, Penn, GSE. There you go, John. So that's my headline. It's about 120 characters, no more. And again, it doesn't say CEO or founder or whatever, you know, your title is. It's what people see, and so that they want to start reading. So that $1 million message clearly positions exactly who you help and how you help them. And there's a formula for that, which I'm happy to share with folks if you want to reach out. There's a very clear formula. John, have you gotten to your LinkedIn and done that yet?
I've actually been working on it a little bit. What I like about the highlights there, Josh, is that it's quantifiable. You know, you talked about an amount of leads that the prospects and clients that you work with can expect to generate as a result of working with you. So it's not just a wishy-washy, it's not just colorful words, it's it's actionable insights and quantifiable metrics that you list out there on your LinkedIn.
And
I'm
the thing
working
is-
on it
Yeah. Okay. I'm here to help you.
as a result of your coaching.
Thank you. I'm here to help you and on that and anything else you need. The $1 million message starts off the LinkedIn profile, and honestly, feel free to, if you think it's good, take mine, copy and paste it, and use that formula. The LinkedIn makeover transformation. Again, we're going from CV to a high converting sales page. You're going to change the content. Okay. The about, the experience, all of that should be a sales funnel. You know, you don't need to just write, hey, you know, I was at this spot or that spot, but what did you do there that your ideal client is going to be impressed with? And finally, you can do banners. You know, banners are a real easy way. If you just want to get a couple quick wins, the banner is that part, the back part of a LinkedIn profile, and your banner can start to showcase. So if you've got yourself on a stage talking to thousands of people, or maybe you're talking to nobody, just get on a stage and have somebody take a picture of you. You know, it just demonstrates authority, and maybe put your logo or some of your clients that you've worked with, or in the education space, you can't go wrong with smiling kids. But please just don't leave it blank.
Josh, as
But
I was preparing for this too, I was thinking a lot about your model in terms of evaluate the ideal client, the $1 million message, and the LinkedIn makeover. Backing up for a second on the $1 million message, I was really thinking about, and Lisa named it in my bio, PACE, the Partnership for Academic and Community Excellence, which when we were working on our one-liner 21 years ago, I can still recite it today.
Yeah.
PACE is the first and only school-to-home communications network that allows a school administrator to record a personalized voice message and send it to parents in a moment's notice. PACE requires no additional hardware, no additional software, and no formal training to operate. Like 21 years practicing with our team over and over again. This isn't just like get your one-liner. It's institutionalized into the bones of the company. And 21 years later, 22 years later, we can still recite that. And I work with a lot of former customers and a lot of former employees and team members who could also recite that. That's something that after we exited, that company is still doing about $175 million in annualized revenue right now. So this isn't just words on a slide. This is something that needs to be institutionalized by founders, coming up with that one-liner and working with your team through the values of the company to be able to recite it, talk about it on stage, in your LinkedIn, in social media, reinforcing it over and over and over again will really pay dividends.
Yeah, it's something that's, in your heart, I think, and it's confidence building. To your point, I can remember for many years struggling with my after-school enrichment company that morphed into summer camp and aftercare in the Washington, D.C. area, up and down the East Coast. And people would say, "What do you do?" And I would go into this long, it wasn't 120 characters, and it didn't sound like yours. And until I started using the word cornerstone, if I said, and Lisa remembers this company, if I said, the cornerstone of what Flex Academies does is after school enrichment. We also help schools and school districts with summer camps and aftercare. But if I didn't start with like that cornerstone of this is where we started, then I would just go off on a tangent that didn't make sense, not even to me. And so when I stuck with cornerstone, that built my confidence. And so I think it is a tough exercise. It's something that I've worked on with clients through my course. It could take weeks, 120 characters. It could take weeks, but it's worth it. Does anybody want to chime in? And feel free to, unmute and chime in. We have a group here that I think a lot of people have probably worked on this that want to share stories on your headline.
Josh, real quick question too, while folks are deciding if they want to add in. Sylvia has a great question about your personal LinkedIn page versus the company LinkedIn page. And since it sounds like you're trying to make your personal slightly more like your company, how do you differentiate? How does the relationship between the two exist?
So one of my somebody I'm working with is on this call, and we exactly did this in the last couple of weeks. And my feeling is that you lead with the personal, especially if you're the CEO, because at this point, a lot of the business is about you. And so start with the personal LinkedIn page, really get that firm. And then I believe, and I have seen that the company LinkedIn page, that even the company website will begin to take shape after you've done the personal, after you've asked those hard questions of yourself, done the 120 characters, then that headline potentially on the website, looks a lot like should your headline on your LinkedIn personal profile. So I say start there. John?
100%. Again, since you outed me as not having the best LinkedIn profile, I will reinforce and echo that advice and that insight in terms of how to set that up in terms of the mechanics and the practical application of company versus personal profiles.
Cool. And Lisa, if you're willing to ride shotgun and drive the chat, that's great. Feel free.
Yeah,
to bring
no
that up.
problem.
Anybody else want to chime in? Again, feel free to unmute. We know a few of you all, so just hop in and let's talk headline.
Yeah, sure, I will. It's Susan Gold from Feynman School. Exhausted after a weekend of being the Uber driver for my children, so I'm not going to turn my camera on.
Cool.
But yeah, I think that focusing in on that headline helps you refocus the mission of your business also.
It's a tough exercise, right, Susan?
Yes, but it's worth it.
We can speak to that together.
And you have to have divergent thinking. You're not allowed to say no to anything.
That's right. Yeah, Susan and I had clearly a memorable headbutt on her headline, but it came out really nice. I think maybe Susan, you can speak to this, but I think that the LinkedIn profile gave you more confidence. You know, talking to parents, talking to some of the heads of schools in the DC area.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Great.
and I mean, like Josh said, you're personal. I mean, it's not a dating app. So it's like you want people to know what you do and your business. So it's your personal is almost just an offshoot of your business. LinkedIn, I think.
Anybody else want to chime in on the headline? Having experiences, headbutting experiences with yourself or somebody you work with on what your headline should be? Think about it. We'll move on to excavate. And this is where we get to the practical part of the discovery, the raising your hand. And this is where I think you become very confident in talking to potential leads. But I want to make this very clear. We're calling them leads, but when you do the raise your hand strategy, which I'll explain, you should not, please do not look or think or feel that the people you're talking to are leads, in the sense that you are having a very clear discussion with them about what you do and how you can do it better to help them. And your goal is not to sell, because it will cloud your conversation. The raise your hand formula, again, helps you become confident talking to your ideal clients and precisely what they need, and it would help them buy from you, but it's not the goal at that point. This will, again, help boost the company's credibility by just having a conversation, by just listening, and not by selling. So, John, do you have a feel for, is this something that people should do literally on the phone, via Zoom, coffee, LinkedIn, email, or is it kind of the preference? You just got to do the X amount of raise your hand conversation.
Well, I think in the excavate is one of my favorite components of this model. And I always think that we can flip the bullets here. I think that before you raise your hand, you have to let the credibility or the evidence of effectiveness of your product or service do the work for you to make it easier for when you do raise your hand, that you have that credibility or efficacy or evidence of effectiveness. Now, as you know, I work with all of the usual suspects in the education, ed tech, venture capital world, the Reaches, the Owls, the New Markets, the GSVs. And we are all aligned on what leads to credibility in this space. And that is two things. First is the underlying research that is used to substantiate your value proposition. Back to Gabon, because I've worked with them recently. Being able to cite the underlying research that substantiates why a more involved parent leads to, over time, leads to a higher achieving student. If you're able to raise your hand and say that the research shows, this researcher says, or this group or body of research says that the value proposition that you're putting forth actually can substantiate your claim to providing that differentiated product or service, you're halfway there. The second area of that, and again, this is reinforced by the VC space, is your evaluative model. How are you measuring success? What is the outcomes by which you can state will substantiate the value that you're providing out there? So first, it's underlying research that's kind of supporting your value proposition or your logic model, but then it's also the evaluative model, how you're measuring success. And when you could raise your hand and say researchers at the University of Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or the University of Maryland have stated that this is what leads to a whole child, or this is what leads to college and career readiness, or this is what leads to better workforce development or mental health. And we've delivered that over this period of time in this specific way, raising your hand and it moving beyond just a claim And having that substantiated credibility makes all of the difference with your signature solution. So in summary, underlying research, evaluative model, and being able to use that when you're raising your hand and excavating opportunities, through this process.
What if you don't have credibility, but you really want to go out and start having conversations with superintendents or principals or parents about what you think you can do to transform their lives? So what if you don't have that credibility built up already, like Gabon does?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that's why the process that is laid out here is linear. I think that you have to go out and ask those questions. And if you don't have a logic model that's substantiated with research, you better get one. If you don't have an evaluative model by which you're measuring the impact of what you're delivering, you're probably not going to have a lot of success. I think you're going to have a lot of claims, and I think you're going to have hunches, and you might be able to support your model because you've had a lot of experience in the classroom or you've had a lot of experience as a business person. But until you really are able to categorize and institutionalize the process by which you're using research to substantiate and a model to measure, that's when the magic happens. That's when the success happens, in my experience. So back to the 100 customer discovery conversations. I actually think you can blend customer discovery with a commitment to co-create. And what I mean by that is when you're asking questions on vitamins versus pain, and you're asking questions about a hair on fire issue like mental health right now in the education space, you might be able to say, well, we're attacking it this way, but what do you think, superintendent or principal? Can we bring this hypothesis, as Steve Blank calls it, into your environment and test it, co-create with you based on what we find as we're discovering what would make the difference or what would deliver value in this space. So it's asking a lot of questions. It's being deliberate about discovery. It's about learning what will work. It's about substantiating with research and having an intentional evaluative model. And then it's about a commitment, as if you're early on in this process, to co-create or co-construct what you're developing inside of educational environments to really hone in on the value proposition.
I like that. And we have a framework that we've worked up in terms of how you do the raise your hand. Again, what I've tried to do in this course is to make it so that people can kind of tailor make the outreach themselves. John and I have a mutual friend that I worked with. And, she kind of said, I'm just not comfortable sending emails, and I said, okay, let's find another way to get you out there. We got to do the lead generation, but let's find a way that you're more comfortable with so that you're not holding back. So the raise your hand, it needs to be done. The discovery needs to be done, but there are ways to do it to make it comfortable for you. The signature solution is something we're going to talk about. We're going to get to that slide. I know it's one that John loves. It's going to be later in our talk here, but that's where we package and position and need to package and position what you do. And I'll show you and can send you my example. I've worked on this also for a long time. And it's your irresistible offer, world-class results for your potential client, whoever that is. And it's the transformation. Okay, it answers the why. It's not the bells and the whistles, it answers the why. So we'll talk about that. Any questions on Excavate and specifically kind of the raise your hand? And I realized that I think, John and I are potentially giving differing views on this, and that we agree with the raise your hand, but I'm asking it more from potentially, hey, if you don't have any credibility built, what do you do? And John kind of gave an example. If you do have credibility, here's how you do it. So any questions, feel free to chime in. In the meantime, we'll go over to Elevate. To me, this is where the real fun begins. This is where we, start setting up a repeatable lead generation system so you can confidently open these conversations that we talked about. And by the way, then close the sale. You got to scale. Okay. You get to a point, I think, in your business where you figure out what works to scale. John, do you remember that moment in your business where you said, well, obviously, clearly your headline was part of that process, but where you began to see not just the hockey stick, not just the revenue, but the confidence that you had inside of you to go out and talk to principals and superintendents?
Yeah, it was a lot of work. I mean, again, back to the paradox of humility and will that I talk about. I went through 2 years of having this incredible value proposition, doing a lot of this customer discovery, and mortgaging my house and having no customers because I didn't know how to go through this process and ultimately get to the Elevate. I would say, though, to answer your question directly, when do I know we're in position to scale or get to the to the end of the Elevate process? It's when you've institutionalized what I call a bottoms up and top down sales process. And what I mean by that is top down tends to be more relationships. So you've already got a couple of anchor tenant clients, and those clients become your biggest salespeople. They're calling their colleagues and saying, you need to do this because we did it. It's rooted in research, and there's an evaluative model that actually works, and it aligns to these funding lines. Bottoms up is more classic lead generation, where you're sending emails, you're nurturing relationships. Somebody has expressed at a trade show or a response to an email that they're interested in your product and service. How do you nurture that? Through a drip email engine, through a constant contact, through some way of having what I call a time-sensitive, event-triggered communication or contact with that prospect. I don't think that I've ever been in a situation or seen a situation of anyone who's had an ability to scale their business before both that top down and that bottoms up process has been put in place in a balanced way.
That makes sense. When the time is right, I think sales engines are good. And that's where I talk about work with people to figure out what's best for them. I've kind of got 3 different sales engines that we craft for people. One of them via email. Consistently the open rates are 70 to 80%. John has seen this. Reply rates around 6 to 8%. And a lot of people say, well, how do you do that? Well, first of all, we've got great lists that we build from the ground up. Don't buy. Second, you've got to write well. Okay. If you don't write well and succinctly, nobody's going to read it. Oh, and third, the emails have to actually land, and that's getting harder and harder. So email deliverability is something that people don't take into account. You do not want to be sending from your actual email address. There are some tricks to the trade where you can send from some other domains that look like yours, because you never want to injure your top level domain. There's some risk involved, and there's a lot of reward involved in that. Also, shows are a great way. We've created shows for people that they use that platform to nurture relationships. It's not necessarily about the amount of people that show up. You know, if you do a show and you've got, for example, a live show, and you've got a guest and you've got one potential client that shows up and they become your client, that was a very successful show. You can also use the platform of your show to bring people onto your stage and nurture that relationship, because as John has seen, and we do this, we did this with Lisa with Breaking the Grade, is that you have a different conversation. You learn different things about people, personally and professionally. And then, you might be ready to do business with them, or you've earned their trust and they may be willing to introduce you to other people. Lisa, true, false?
Right, I was on mute. Yes, absolutely true.
Yeah, we've had a good
Absolutely
conversation.
true.
Exactly. I don't think we would have learned that Lisa happened to be engaged to one of our somebody that we know very well in the education space had we not had that conversation when we brought her on Breaking the Grade. So there's a lot to learn. And then finally, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is another engine that we build for people because it's comfortable for them. It's very powerful. LinkedIn is very, very powerful. I would go as far as to say that LinkedIn is potentially more powerful than your own website because of its SEO, because it's the way it's set up, because it's the first place that people go generally, professionally, to look you up. So we build these engines to help people get out there. Qualified leads, though, is the most important. We need to take our leads from cold to warm, and they have to be qualified. So it's not just any lead based on, if you think back to all what we've talked about here, we position you with credibility. You started to raise your hand and have conversations, and now we can build a list. Now we can begin to target high quality leads, not just anybody. I'd much rather have a list of 100 people that I really want to talk to than 1,000 or 100,000 people that may want to talk to me. John, do you want to weigh in on that?
I would agree with that. I would also emphasize the power of having a CRM, an actual CRM solution. If you are engaging or working with any prospects, having that housed in a HubSpot or a Salesforce or a customer relationship management engine, I think is important. And if you have a team, and it can be a lean team, it doesn't even have to be a big team, meeting weekly and setting goals and having different thresholds by which you are moving prospects through the pipeline, I think is critically important. Back to the ALs, the GSBs, the reaches, and the VCs that I'm working with, they're now looking less at ARR, annual recurring revenue, and more at NRR, net recurring revenue, looking at things like, what are your contact to contract ratios? How fast are you able to close opportunities? How fast are you able, if you're going from freemium to a paid model, are you able to capture leads and then convert them and then upsell them and then ultimately renew them? That's all going into the metrics, and it's tough right now to raise capital, right? But if you're able to measurably show inside of your HubSpot instance how those customers are moving through that process from contacting them, presenting, pitching, and converting them to an actual customer, will make all the difference in the world in how you're able to raise capital ultimately.
That is music to my ears, probably not music to the ears of most of the CEOs out there, because the ARR versus the NRR means that everything we've talked about over the last 40 minutes is very important, extremely important, because it talks about targeting. It talks about making sure you get the right people in there, making sure the contracts continue. And what you talked about with the CRM kind of flows into bullet point number 3, which is scale, automation. When you get to that point, when you get to that hockey stick, when you feel that momentum, when you've done the top down, bottoms up that John is talking about, you got to do it in a scalable way. That means a CRM, that means total automation. And you got to bring in these leads on repeat. You don't just stop, because now you've figured out who the right person is. You know how to target them. You know how to talk to them. You're confident. Let's find more of them and let's get you out there. This is the part in the conversation where I can't see it because not everybody's got their camera on, but generally people kind of lean in and they start looking. This is the signature solution. The signature solution is, it's a business coaching term. And I'm not sure for everybody if a signature solution is something that they show to their potential clients. I do, because I want people to see the 9-step process that the transformation that they would enjoy, that they would go through by working together. But just having a signature solution that you might keep, I keep it in the bottom right of my desktop all the time. I happen to show mine, but I know some of my clients that I work with do not show their signature solution, but it gives them guardrails on the whole conversation to talk about the why. And if you lean in a little bit, everything there is not the $1 million message, not how we do it, why we do it. Not how we build credibility, but why we do it. Because there's nothing you can argue with there when you're hearing this, because it's all true. And so I work with our clients to create this signature solution. Again, they may show it to potential clients for themselves in a presentation, or they may just kind of keep it to their right, but it gives them guardrails and it reminds them to talk about the why. John, this isn't not an exercise we've done together, but when you look at kind kind of the lead generation roadmap here, the ed sales elevation experience. Can you just talk about why this is important to have really dialed in your transformation for clients?
Well, first, I'd say that what I'm looking at on screen, and as I've worked with you on this, that this is a framework, not a silver bullet, and that I love that it's a guide. I'm seeing 9 steps that can change a little bit depending on the type of business that's being developed, right? Sometimes when a prospect may need to spend a lot more time on the ideal client because they may have little to no experience in working in the ed tech space. Someone like Susan, who's been in the classroom for, I don't want to out her, decades, may not need to spend as much time on an ideal client and can move right into $1 million message or a LinkedIn. So there's no prescription here. In fact, I like to think, as I've been working with you, that the prescription is non-prescription, but abiding by the framework. I don't believe you can get to credibility without establishing who the ideal client is first. So it's not a prescription where you have to, spend specific amounts of time on a specific element of these 9 steps and these 3 levels. But I think it's a tremendous framework that an ed tech, an education entrepreneur can go through to help guide their process, their design and development process accordingly.
And I am happy to send this to anybody. In fact, I'm working with my coach, not Coach Gamba, but another coach that I have. As we're going to begin to put these things out there, so that people can take what they can from them. If you want to talk more about it, we can. But there is as you said, a prescription here for people to follow. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, let's do that. So the ed sales elevation
Real
experience.
quick, if I can interrupt for 2 seconds as we're wrapping up or getting close, but Jackie had a question about one of your previous comments about using another email address other than your own. Her question is, how does that jive with relationship building and using your own personal identity if you're setting up a separate email address? So before we move forward, if you could address that and then maybe leave some time at the end if other people have some random questions about the entire presentation.
Yeah, I realize that we're partnering up with Next on this. So there is nothing that I am suggesting here that it is illegal at all in terms of domains. But what I do, for example, for our business, if I send my email address is jc@joshchernikoff.com, and I might send emails from josh@josh-chernikoff.com. And you need to warm up that email address so that the emails can land. Again, you need to have a great list and you need to write well. And to answer the question, I think that as long as people are receiving the email and it's something that they want to know about, then they're going to open it, hence the open rates that we have. And when they reply, we use a tool called Instantly where we reply from within instantly. Now, once they're ready to book a conversation, that's where the real magic happens, then we will send the invite from my jc@joshchernikoff.com. So we've kind of moved the conversation at that point to my actual email address. Again, I think that email provides you with an opportunity that's low cost, that you can test, and that you can really reach people in a way that they're comfortable with. I think we're all probably getting tired of a little less LinkedIn, would be good, but email still works. And to me, it works the best. Does that answer your question, Jackie?
Yes, it does. And, that is part of building your own brand, so to speak. I mean, that's that I have my own brand along with the brand of my company. So it makes sense. Thank you.
Good. So the community that we're building, John and I are part of this, is the Ed Sales Elevation Experience. It's a community. We are entrepreneurs. We are CEOs. We're working together and be happy to have everybody join. Maybe we can send something out to the group, or feel free to reach out to us, LinkedIn, email, and we can get you as into the community. Let's move to Q&A. So we got a question from Jackie and Susan. So I'd like to open it up, and feel free to ask anything about lead generation in the education space. We'll try and answer it.
Go ahead, Catherine. Feel free to chime in.
Hi there. I just thank you so much for all of this information. It's been incredibly helpful. I have a question about the LinkedIn tagline, because in EdTech specifically, you know, a lot of our products are designed for students. So it's really tempting to write a tagline that says, you know, we help students accomplish X, Y, and Z. But of course, students are not on LinkedIn. You know, that's not who we're trying to target with our LinkedIn pages. If our revenue model is based on B2B sales to school districts, do you think that LinkedIn tagline should still say we help students do X, Y, and Z? Or do you think that we should target it towards that B2B buyer? So for example, we help school districts or career and technical education programs accomplish X, Y, and Z. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
John, do you want to chime in?
I think that's a great question. I'm going to let you, Josh, chime in on the mechanics of the headline. But we, in working with EdTech entrepreneurs, Catherine, thread that needle all the time, right? At the end of the day, who is the user persona? Can you categorize and quantify the end user of the product and differentiate between the end user and the buyer of the product? So we straddle that, we navigate that all the time. And welcome to the world of B2B sales. You have to be able to demonstrate to an administrator that they are, as they purchase this, that there's going to be an outcome delivered to the end user. Personally, and I don't want to step on Josh's toes, I would be focused on the end user, because at the end of the day, it won't be purchased if it doesn't impact the end user accordingly.
I agree. The end user is who to focus on. Anybody else want to give their thoughts or can say, no, you know, I don't agree with that?
Just a quick question. Can you focus on the end user, but how then the benefit to the end user, the impact that has on the buyer? Or does that get too big?
John, you were nodding before I started nodding.
I think that you have to quantify both. I think at the end of the day, it's the end user who's being impacted, and the way you substantiate the solution to the buyer is encapsulated in the service and value you're providing and delivering to the end user. I think you have to do both.
Yeah. Thank
I'm going
you.
to call Susan out because she's here and she certainly isn't shy. And this is some of the work that we did on Susan's profile here. And I think we did a nice job of, and it does kind of straddle that line here. You know, they obviously help gifted learners, but who are they really talking to? Parents.
Mhm.
And we even, you know, again, there's a formula that goes into these 120 characters, who you help, how you help them as well, that infinite potential model. And then I'm just going to scroll down here. And this was, by the way, this was the banner that I was talking about here. Shows Susan in action. And Susan, I believe that's your daughter. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. It's Susan and her daughter in action. And then just gives you an idea of what I mean about a sales focused LinkedIn profile. This does not look like, you know, your LinkedIn profile or mine, you know, of 5 years ago. This is designed to ask people questions, build that credibility, and then try and get them to you know, to get in touch with you. And in Susan's case, again, she's helping these gifted learners, these curious minds, and we went back and forth on that a lot. But we're really speaking to the parents who might, you know, find out about her and then go to her LinkedIn profile and learn about her. Susan, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful, even though you might be wanting to target the students in the end, they're still, I don't know what age group you're working with, but if they're still at home, then you definitely want to get the parent buy-in as well. So it's good to try to reach both.
Susan's the principal of a school, the head of a school.
Mhm.
So she's the perfect person to kind of talk about this in terms of like, between Sylvie and Susan, who should Gabon be talking about in their LinkedIn profile, because you're probably hoping to reach somebody like Susan for her to say, yeah, this is Gabon's great for my school. Let me learn more.
Mhm.
Great. And Rashi, you have your hand up. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a question. I think we learned quite a bit about lead generation. Could you perhaps touch on closing? Because as we all know, in the school district, there are a couple of, like if, for example, I have a superintendent who's super excited about a product, but she can't buy it. She has to go through the curriculum director. And so are there tips around closing? What do you need to do after you get them excited?
I'm going to let John take a whack at this one. My forte is really the lead generation. But I think John has specific ideas when it comes to how to close those deals.
Happens to be my favorite topic.
How about that? Who knew?
Rashi, a couple of thoughts. First of all, when you get a superintendent or a cabinet level superintendent excited about a product, make sure you have in your hand and you've studied their strategic plan. They are published 99% of the time. And if you are, for instance, working on a social emotional learning product and service, it's always nice to say, I noticed that section 2.7.8.4 of your strategic plan and the last board minutes of your board meeting talked about the importance of intentional SEL or whole child development. Being able to demonstrate that you've done the homework and you've figured out how to align your product and service to their strategic plan is table stakes and critically important. That's tip number one. The other one is being able to know exactly how it can be funded and not preaching this. You will fund this through ESSER, but being able to present in your presentation, this is how other districts have funded this through the $190 billion CARES Act that's been appropriated through Congress as a result of COVID relief, and being able to present allowable uses of that funding. It's all public, and being knowledgeable and strategic and helping them do their job, again, not in a preachy way, but in a consultative way, will make all the difference as you're trying to condense or contract that contact to contract. I was going to ask this too, because this relates to Rashi's question, Josh. As you're scrolling down too, it really doesn't hurt. And I don't know if Susan has this. Testimonials, right? Can somebody write a testimonial, whether that's a parent? In Rashi's case, wouldn't it be great with her product and service if Susan Enfield from Washoe County, Nevada, one of the pioneers in the ed tech education space, a thought leader who really has it together, has written about your product and service. Gabon has really made a difference because our students are now engaged habitually over time with their parents, having conversations that matter during these troubling times. So the power of testimonials, having somebody else account for the success of your product and service instead of you being the one that's always preaching about it, I think is important. To summarize, the strategic plan, they're posted. Know that before you start talking in a presentation way. Funding sources, being able to see whether it's Title I, Title II, Title I through 4, ESSER, ESSA, all of these alignments, and having that knowledge before expecting to close the deal, I think is critically important. And then 3 is testimonials. This district has used it and it's delivered measurable results as a result of implementing it over time. Those are just 3 key elements that I would say maximize your chances of being able to get a proposal out and getting it signed for a closed deal.
True.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Yeah. It just so happens, John, at the Ed Sales Elevation Experience, we teach that.
Yeah.
I mean, getting testimonials is great, but there's a formula for asking for them as well. And LinkedIn does a really nice job, helping you ask for them, and then you can translate them from your LinkedIn profile to your website. But just asking people for a testimonial is not easy. And then the other part is case studies, which are kind of testimonials on steroids. And there's a formula for that. And the case studies are very helpful as well. And to put them out there in a comfortable way, so that whoever you're selling to could see them, and you don't have to put them in front of their face, in an email or something like that is great if it's on their LinkedIn.
And Brian,
other questions?
Josh, I didn't see another hand raised. I'm going to just jump in because Brian's here. He was one of the first ones to jump in. And I just want to make a comment on something he had said. CRO, but also responsible for customer success. On the 9th point, I think, of the sales elevation process is scale. I like to say, if you have customers, use customer success as a sales agent, as a sales catalyst. And I like to think, this is one of my favorite topics as well, using testimonials or case studies. Customer success to me encompasses three important things. First is the onboarding process. Will that customer, whether it's a principal or a superintendent, say, wow, this was really easy to onboard. I was able to use this, usernames, passwords, onboarding. Two is the implementation. How is it being used inside of that educational environment where they're trying to implement hundreds of different products and services? And if that's fluid, that's critically important. That's a pedagogical process in most cases with EdTech. And then finally, customer success itself, what I call the celebratory process, the case study. Who are the rock stars who are using it inside of the district? Name them, the teachers, the principals who are really using that product or service, being able to have them come out, because you never know, they might become part of your LinkedIn, right? If you're able to actually put your thumb on good users, that tends to change the behavior of the lack of users. And usage leads to renewals. Renewals lead to more sales lead to more scale.
Brian, you're the CRO. Does that sound right?
It sounds exactly right. Yeah. No, I mean, that's everything we try to do. And it's been even more beneficial when having those beginning calls with people to be able to understand the full process, because then that just shows the credibility that it's going to be an effortless experience with them. So
that's the next argument too, is customer success or customer experience under the CRO. I really believe in that, not separating it out in silos.
Fantastic. Wow. Any final thoughts, Josh, John? Summarize. John, I know you got another magnificent quote for us that to end the session with. Any final words from you guys as hosts?
Go ahead, Josh, you first.
Well, I'll use one that Lisa probably knows well from from DC, which is go 1-0 today, which is when the Nationals won the World Series back in 2018. They were backs up against the wall, and their coach said just win one game each day. So we tossed a lot at you guys. If you can just do one of these things, each day, and maybe just start with the LinkedIn headline and work on that, then that's a big win for you. So go 1-0 today.
I'll say that Steve Blank once said, unless you have tested the assumptions in your business model first, outside the building, your business plan is just creative writing.
That is a good food for thought to leave us on. Well, thank you both so much. It doesn't happen often where you can walk away with really so many actionable items, not just the high level stuff, but actual, items to check off your to-do list. So thank you very much, both Josh and John. I will be circulating this recording because there's so much good stuff in it for everybody to listen to again. Thank you all for participating in our next partner webinar. Check out our website for more dates and other interesting things. We have Next Raise, our latest initiative, helping connect founders and funders. Startup U, as I mentioned before, an educational platform. Pitch Masters, our monthly pitch workshop. Lots of good stuff there. So thank you again, Josh and John, and thank you all for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day and
Thank
week.
you.
Bye-bye.